you all very much. It's good to see her. So,
I know people got some questions.
I have one. So I met you in a very small meeting with Tim Carpenter. It was maybe
PDA.
yes, the PDA meeting. So my question is, how's that Peace Caucus going? Said you started the Peace Caucus?
In California. California Democratic Party. Peace Caucus.
I was thinking maybe, is anybody working on peace up in D.C.?
Department of Peace building, you know, Dennis said before, National Senate. And so, and I try to get people on the Hill, members of Congress, to use the P words, poverty and peace. And you know, and more people are beginning to talk about it, but these are two ideas that elected officials run from. And so I chair the Global Peace and Security Task Force of the Progressive Caucus. We call it Global Peace.
Yeah.
And so every chance I get with some of my colleagues, we use the P words, poverty and peace, because we've got to break through on behalf of peace and on behalf of people living below the poverty line, because they need a voice. They need to be able to be lifted out of poverty and move on and be able to take care of their family. So it's hard.
Yeah.
You'd think it'd be simple.
Well, you're a great hero in terms of standing against the war in Afghanistan and Iraq, and for so many of the great things you've done. I'm wondering what your position is in terms of freeing Assange, Julian Assange, and in protecting the rights of journalists and those, you know, seeking freedom of speech in the United States.
Well, I believe in freedom of speech. I really, the issue around Assange, I'm not sure where he is now. Is he still in England?
No,
he's in jail. And so I would really rather respond to that once I know the situation. I mean, I believe in freedom of speech. I don't believe people should be incarcerated because of their views, because
they are trying to bring him here because of the Espionage Act,
Yeah.
because he showed the war crimes in
Yeah.
Iraq.
yeah. Well, hopefully the Justice Department will allow him to have a free trial, a fair and free trial. And that's what's necessary, I think. And supporting free speech is something that all people should be proud of having, and not trying to shut down people who want to talk about what's important. And there's a whole balance between national security and free speech, you know, that I know this country is trying to deal with him. But I need to kind of drill down a little bit more on what I think should be the next steps for him. Okay?
I know Sudi had a question.
It's truly an honor, as I mentioned earlier. So, of course, Progressive, part of the steering committee of the Feel the Burn, but I'm also here as representative of the Iranian American Democrats of California. And as you know, women are standing up for their rights in Iran. Girls are being attacked with chemical gas, and there is, ambiguity in the policy of this administration. The last memo on the policy of United States towards Iran was issued by Trump, and until a new policy hasn't been issued, that basically it means that this administration is still, operating under Trump's, mindset.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested to know, Senate has a big piece in foreign policy. What are your thoughts? And, if you were to be advocating for, of course, peace, but also prosperity, there's the other P, right? And, for the right for democracy, what would be your thoughts on the situation in Iran?
And I think first thing is, I still support the JCPOA and not acquiring a nuclear weapon, but we see where we are with that. We can't, and the negotiations have in many ways come to a halt. But secondly, I was one of the few who said, let's end the policy of isolation. Let's talk to Iran, because as it relates to women, for example, you have to have a country that's going to support the rights of women. If you're not engaged diplomatically with the country, then you have no real leverage. And so I really believe we need to have a special envoy. I had legislation calling for a special envoy as it relates to the U.S. and Iran. And also I believe that, and this goes way back, but I had a day on Capitol Hill where we had red telephones, and it was the day I called it Let's Talk to Iran, and we all called women in Iran that day to highlight the need for more U.S. engagement and to end the policy of no contact. And I think we need to be very forceful about what's happening in Iran, but you can't do that if you don't have diplomatic contacts.
But right now, the people of Iran don't want JCPOA.
No, I know that. No, I understand that. But
They're very against it.
yeah, but and the people, I mean, I understand why, but I also know that there's still a no contact policy, direct diplomatic relations with Iran between the United States. And so whatever takes place as it relates to women and the people of Iran, the only way that we can help is by having diplomatic contact and removing that no talking to Iran. And that's got to be part of it. I believe the same thing with Cuba. If you're going to really influence a country for democracy and for human rights, you can't continue to say, I'm not going to engage, and I think we need to engage.
And Venezuela.
Yeah, we need to engage everywhere, you know?
Congressman, I'm sure you've heard the news about President Biden officially approving the Willow Project. What are your thoughts on that project and how we can move forward around climate change, especially when gas companies keep making record profits and we can barely keep up?
Well, 90% of the time I'm unified with the administration and the president and Democrats, but in this instance I issued a statement very quickly that I opposed it, and I think that he should go back to the drawing board on it. We've made a lot of progress on climate through the Inflation Reduction Act, through the infrastructure bill, through a lot of the initiatives. I mean, I chaired the committee that when we were in the majority for the last 2 years that had responsibility for funding all of our global climate accounts, and we did a lot. The Global Climate Fund, we increased the billions of dollars. I was at COP27 last year, and we talked about what it takes for developing countries to help with the damage that has been occurring through fossil fuels in the vulnerable countries and in developing countries, and we finally got to the place where, yeah, we agreed to, and some people don't like to call it reparations, but I mean, it really is helping to repay the damage, okay? And so we need to do that. And so I think that this set us back, the decision on Willow, from some of the great things that are taking place. I mean, we have done a lot on climate, and I'm just hoping that he'll look at it again and reverse the decision. But when I saw that, I came out very quickly to let people know what I felt and what I thought about it.
Hi, my name is Miguel. I have a question. What is your position on the U.S. and Russian war in Ukraine? And I have two other questions.
Well, I've been on record supporting the Ukrainian people and providing the resources in terms of loan guarantees, in terms of humanitarian assistance. I've been to Ukraine, Poland, Moldova, Georgia, and Armenia, and that whole region, and I know the dangers that Putin is presenting. And I know ultimately it's got to be a diplomatic solution, but I think right now, Zelensky, we have to support Zelensky, and we have to make sure that the Ukrainian people win, and I think they will. But having said that, I have communicated with several people in Congress the fact that we believe the president when he says he's not going to allow the United States to engage directly with Russia and put us into the possible chance of a third world war or a nuclear war. And we have said, and I've said over and over again, that if in fact this policy changes, you have to come to Congress for an authorization to use force. You can't just insert U.S. troops or have a direct confrontation with Russia. And so it's a fine line right now, but I believe the Ukrainian people deserve our support. I do. And I believe that they're going to win, but I know ultimately it's going to have to be a diplomatic solution. And Zelensky has got to be ready or lead that effort. It can't be the United States saying it's time. It's got to be Zelensky and NATO and the world community saying now it's time for diplomacy. And that's the only way it's going to end.
You oppose the invasion of Iraq? You
Yeah.
vote against that.
Uh,
So why do you think that we have to support Ukrainian? Because we didn't support the Iraqi against the U.S. invasion. We didn't support the Afghan against the U.S. invasion. We didn't support the Syrian and destruction of the Syrian invasion. We didn't support the Libyan when the U.S. destroyed Libya. Why are we supporting this war? I mean, Ukrainian people are suffering. Not American, not Russian. All the arms is going that create deepening the war. I'm anti-war, any kind of war.
Yeah.
Whether it's led by US or Russia or China or any other government. But why, I mean, Bernie Sanders, which I'm a diehard supporter of Bernie, he has the same position. But I think this position is allowing more catastrophic situation happening in Ukraine and more Ukrainians get killed.
well, I guess.
We are hearing
yeah.
one-sided news that Ukrainian call killing 10,000, 20,000 Russian, and both sides are, I mean, Ukrainians getting killed. Why we are giving the arms? Why we have to give $50 billion of our hard-earned tax money, pumping the war machine into the Ukraine and getting the whole Europe and the NATO? Isn't that we are going toward a nuclear war by supporting that war?
Well, I believe we've got to support. Putin's on a move. He's really moving very aggressively, trying to turn Eastern Europe into democracies into autocratic governments. I mean, he's trying to topple, I believe, democracies as he can. And he's starting with Ukraine, and it's going, I believe it will spread. And I think we have to stop Putin. It's a war of aggression against the Ukrainian people. And I am anti-war also, but I also believe we have to defend people who are being slaughtered every day, and children and women. I mean, again, I've been to Ukraine and I've been to Poland, and I know what's taking place there. And somehow, and I don't know what the answer is, but somehow we've got to get to where there could be a diplomatic solution. But we can't just leave them exposed. And we can't engage with Russia either directly, and we have to let the administration know.
I'm sorry, you know, you providing the arms, administration, and none of the progressive, democratic parties are not pushing the negotiation and talk for the peace.
Well,
And as long as this continues, we're going to waste our money and more Ukrainians are going to get killed. Ukraine are not going to be able to beat Russia.
Yeah.
That's what we think.
Well,
that's not going to happen.
yeah, okay. I think they will, and I think also that the ultimate solution, Zelensky's got to be very clear on the diplomatic option and when that needs to happen. And we can't jump ahead of Zelensky in this because there's too much slaughter going on right now, and we have to be very, very in sync with how we do that. But ultimately, it will be a diplomatic solution.
There you go. Yes, ma'am.
Congressman Lee, thanks for coming back to Orange County. You were here a couple weeks ago, remember? The recent collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank, which was, looks like a canary in the coal mine. Back in the late 90s, there was a senator from North Dakota, Byron Dorgan, who on the floor of the Senate warned for the Financial Services Act not to repeal Glass-Steagall. I think he may have been the only senator that said that. He said, and his words were something along the effect, that if you do this now, the devastation will occur in less than a decade. He was right. 9 years later, in 2008, the biggest collapse ever. You have been on the record of actually voting against the deregulation of the banks. Tell us
And
more
for
about
Glass-Steagall, for reinstituting provisions of Glass-Steagall.
exactly. So tell us more about what you, because this is really the beginning of something that could be much more catastrophic. They just bailed out First Federal Bank, Republic Bank, just a couple of days ago. What do you think should be?
Yeah, well, first I think that those who are responsible should be held accountable. Okay.
Yes.
Secondly, I want to make sure that we're clear that so far this is not a bailout. I mean, the FDIC has taken fees. I mean, banks have to pay fees for circumstances just like this, so it's not a taxpayer bailout. Thirdly, it was important to make sure that small businesses could meet their payroll because thousands of jobs were and could be at risk. And so it was important that the president did what he did immediately. Next, I think we have to go back and reinstitute some of the Dodd-Frank regulations because, you know, it was the deregulation led to this. And I remember I was on the Financial Services Committee for 10 years with Maxine and with Barney Frank, and I remember that very well. And it was like, why are we letting this happen? And Donald Trump came in and did his thing in terms. So we got to re-regulate these banks, and we have to. You're right, canary in the mine. You know that we have to really understand and learn the lessons, but we have to re-regulate, I think, and that's bottom line. But I do want to make sure that we know that, and unless you know differently, these are not taxpayer bailouts. These are fees paid by banks to the FDIC that provided for depositors to be made whole, for payroll to be met, and for people to keep their jobs.
Thank you for that. And I just wanted to reiterate that the investors and I believe the CEO of SVB are not getting any support. So I appreciate what President Biden's doing. I wanted to ask you about the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Right now, the DMCA is in front of...
Which one is that now? Tell me.
It's the one that says that digital platforms like Facebook and YouTube cannot be sued if there are copyrighted material, child exploitation videos, slanderous videos being posted on their site because it's being posted by a third party. And so if they are notified, then Facebook or Twitter, whomever, might take it down, but they have no liability. So for example, right now the Supreme Court is entertaining a lawsuit by a family, but they're basically like, we don't really know what to do here. It's an act of Congress, and as a millennial, a young person who grew up with the digital age, it's really important to me to know, how are we going to regulate these big social media networks that have data about us, who collect information about us, who make money off us, but are not held liable when, say, sex exploitation videos, revenge porn videos are being posted on their websites, and they don't have to do anything.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of money around lobbying for this, and I think that they should be held liable. And I'm not sure who has the legislation. I'm on the Appropriations and Budget Committee, so I don't see that.
As far as I know,
bills that come
there's no
through.
legislation.
But I believe in making sure that we hold companies accountable for hate speech that leads to violence, or everything that could impact negatively on the company. And no one should be able to get away with it. No company should be able to get away with it.
Congresswoman Lee, this lady is a very modest person who's asked for. She's a local councilwoman who's quite progressive. Sadly, the Police Officers Association, the conservative group, is trying to recall her. And we need more people like her in office.
For sure. You must be doing a good job. You must be doing a really good job.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you. This is great.
So I'm going to move a little bit into a different sector of California and our country as a whole. I know I don't look like I belong.
Where are you from? I was born in El Paso, Texas, so you kind of.
But so with our education system, as we look at it, from I believe it was 1976, students' rights to their own language, that's how it's called. Coming forward, and we're beginning to break down that sense of standard English in the classroom, that it's more of a mainstream American.
Feel free to hold. Un momento, por favor.
He told me to shut up too.
It said you're on fire.
Yeah.
Good.
Going down in flames. I don't do well. But so with the beginnings of moving away from this sense of standard English, there's only one right way to read, to write, to speak, it's beginning to move into other sectors of education that we're moving away from. There's only one right way to do this. So I'm curious what your policies or what your stance is on standardized testing or standardized classes through whether it's California or whether it's across our nation.
And that's a good question. It's a tough question because we're a country that's very diverse and people speak different languages. and we have different cultures. And I'm gonna give you an example. There was a big fight over what we call, Ebonics.
Oh, Oakland.
Okay.
Oakland,
Yeah, and I was on the side of, look, so many kids are being kicked out of school because they come with their parents' language that's historical and they can't communicate. I think that educators need to learn more about those kids' background and what they're saying because they're brilliant, most, and with kids who speak other languages. They come to school, I think English should be taught, but not in the context of putting down and saying this language that you're coming to school with is wrong, because the trauma and the emotional aspects of that are pretty bad. And standardized testing, I mean, it's like, to whose standards?
Right.
To whose standards? So I think we need to really have some real dialogue about educational standards and what makes, what helps really kids not only become educated, but helps them with their self-esteem and their understanding of who they are.
There's a program that a professor on my university's campus, Cal State Fullerton, Bonnie Williams, a black woman as well. It's the Language Policy Allies, and it's to help students and also professors and administrators to understand that students have a right to their own language. And although that has been a strong standing policy, there are still so many professors, even at Cal State Fullerton, who, when they heard, oh, you're going to teach students about their rights, what rights? They don't have rights. That's a professor who's currently teaching. And there are so many students that never know what policies work for them because those policies are hidden on the websites. They're hidden everywhere. And so she's trying to empower the students and encourage them to learn and to give them a place to come so that they can say, hey, I think I'm being discriminated against based on the way that I speak and write the English language.
Good. Yeah, I know my mother. My mother was really smart. She was a great writer. And of course, in the day in Texas, I mean, you had to, she said, speak the King's English, right? And I would come home talking about, I ain't gonna do this. Or I'd be going, talking, way we talk. My mother would get so mad, Harvard, that's not the King's English. Don't you ever let me hear you talking like that. That was in the day. So I understand that very well. I was so upset because it's how I talked, but not at home. My mother was like, So I think we have to have that balance, and I think young people should not be put down, and they should not feel demeaned because they're coming to school with a different culture, a different language, and a different framework, and because otherwise the self-esteem is very low with kids, and then they have other problems where they really can't learn.
It becomes exclusionary.
Yeah. That's great. I know how to talk that talk.
I hope everyone had a chance to ask some amazing questions. We do want to wrap it up a little bit. She's had a very long day, a long week, and her whole campaign is probably very exhausted. But I love this. This is so beautiful. I love this. I do want to make sure to try to get a group shot together before we're not together anymore.